very warm welcome to the Enjoy Holistic interview series with your host, Ian Jones. Today, I would like to welcome to the show my co-host and partner for many years, Mark Chatterton. Over the years, Mark has written several articles for the website and interviewed several of the top names in spirituality and metaphysics, including Eben Alexander, Lorna Byrne, Diana Cooper, Anthony Peake, and many others. Today, the tables are turned and Mark is going to be interviewed by me, particularly about his new book, The Power of Thankfulness. Before I welcome Mark on, I just want to give people an insight into Enjoy Holistic. So if you've not been onto the site before, Enjoy Holistic was founded by myself, particularly to help holistic and spiritual people promote and empower themselves. So the platform allows people to post events on there. We're just rolling out the ability to add online virtual events, which is very important at the moment. And also you can add yourself in our dedicated practitioner listings as well. So people can come onto the site and find holistic and spiritual people within our listings. And we also have a dedicated directory in the website as well, where you can also add details about your spiritual business as well. So, we really hope that Enjoy Holistic is a platform that you enjoy, and do check in to find out amazing interviews that we envisage to do this year. Okay, so a very warm welcome to you, Mark.
Thank you, Ian.
It's really nice to have you on board and to have you being interviewed as well. This is a pleasure to be talking to you about your book that you've written. Before we discuss your book, the Spirit Guide viewers will probably remember you with the interviews that you did. I know this is Enjoy Holistic, but many viewers from the Spirit Guides do come on to Enjoy Holistic. You've been absent for many years, and I just wondered, what was the reason for this, Mark?
Right. Well, the first thing was that in January 2015, I had a stroke, which obviously put me out of action for quite a bit. I'll talk about that in a minute because it's relevant to the book. But obviously, having a stroke is quite a major life-changing experience, and that stopped me doing things for a little while. I'd like to say that I'm more or less fully recovered now. But in the last few years, I have continued to write, and I've written a few books, not on spirituality, but sort of more general in my other hat on transport. And I've also written a novel, which I'm hoping to get published eventually. But, I've still been writing, still been reading lots of spiritual books and so on. So, I haven't sort of disappeared completely, but I'm now back and raring to go.
That's wonderful. I'm really glad that you're in full health, Mark. I know you're going to be discussing this tonight as well. You have a degree in theology from Oxford University. Did you choose that subject because you were into religion at the time? And how has that experience shaped your belief system today?
Right. Well, I studied theology at Oxford because I was introduced to sort of religion from a very early age. My mother was a Catholic and my father was a Protestant. So obviously they sort of crossed the religious divide. It wasn't really a particularly religious household, but at the age of 7, a major change happened in that I ended up going to become a chorister at Chester Cathedral, following in my father's footsteps. I'm a brother before me. And so I was singing at services 5 days a week during the week and then 3 times on a Sunday. So I was exposed to religion it was at Church of England, but of the high sort. So it was quite Catholic orientated as well. And I was a chorister for about 4 years and had that experience to take in. Then I ended up going to secondary school in Birkenhead in the 1970s, and in 1973 the members of the Christian Union were taking assembly that week, and they were playing various bits of music from sort of contemporary artists at the time, like Black Sabbath, Wishbone Ash, and so on. And through that, I became a Christian of the evangelical variety, and I was a Christian for several years, and that led me to studying theology because it's a natural progression. And I happened to be going to a sort of like a little house group where I met someone who was actually at Oxford, and he sort of said, "Oh, why don't you try going into Oxford?" at school they weren't that keen on me doing that because you had to do an exam, a sort of entrance exam, but I persevered and sort of proved them wrong, if you like, and ended up going to Exeter College, Oxford. Some previous people who'd been there included Tolkien and Philip Pullman, who you're probably aware of for his Dark Materials books. So, it was quite an honour to get there, and I was there for 3 years studying theology, and in many ways it was perhaps some of my happiest years of my life. It was quite a sort of different experience because obviously you were sheltered from the real world. Being a student anywhere, you're sort of cocooned from what's going on in the world, and I was sort of busy, partly studying, partly involved in Christian activities, and the sort of logical step was that I considered going into the church as becoming a priest, and I even got accepted for that. But the funny thing was, as soon as I left Oxford and came home, I suddenly felt I don't really believe all this anymore, and perhaps it was a crisis of faith or whatever, but I decided that for me that wasn't quite the truth, that wasn't everything about it. So over the next few years or so, I was sort of looking for different ways, what's the meaning of life, etc., and so on. Read lots of books, and got into things like UFOs and crop circles and mysteries and so on. And gradually, through reading various books, I evolved into what I believe I am today, with my belief system, which is more spirituality. And some books that have sort of helped me or influenced me include Conversations with God, The Celestine Prophecy, and Angels in My Hair. So the readers and viewers will probably be quite familiar with those. So through that, I've read quite a lot, and as Ian has mentioned, I've interviewed some of these people as well. So that's rubbed off on me, and I've always sort of been interested in writing and been doing it for the last 20 years or so. And I've now written this book called The Power of Thankfulness, which I'm going to talk about today. Thank
you for that introduction, Mark. Where did the idea of the power of thankfulness come from? Obviously, it's a very important time at the moment, a lot of fear going around. One thing I'd like to promote amongst all that fear is more positivity, because fear can be a major factor in our health. So, with that in mind, where did the idea of the book come from?
Well, the first thing that happened was, I would say it was the influence of my father. He always used to have this saying, count your blessings. And it was quite interesting because he'd lived through the Second World War. He'd actually been a soldier towards the end of the war, and he actually lied about his age so he could join up. And he was fighting in Normandy. He came into action about 3 weeks after the D-Day landings, and was involved in the fighting there. So he must have seen some quite horrific things. And he got wounded after a few weeks and had to go back to England and recovered. Then he went back into battle in Holland and then Germany, and he always used to tell us about some of the sights he'd seen, particularly people starving and all the destruction. And so I could understand from his point of view why he said that, and that was sort of the first influence. And I'd always been a fairly positive person in life, and if something happened, I'd always sort of try and overcome whatever problems and get on with things. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I had this stroke in 2015, which it was quite a shock. Wasn't expected or anything, and I was just sitting here in this room in my office study, if you like, one lunchtime, and I just suddenly sneezed 4 times on the trot, and unbeknown to me, that sort of triggered. There was a blood clot in my lower part of my body, and it made it move up to my brain, and within a few minutes my head started feeling funny. Luckily I went downstairs, and then the next thing, this side of my face round here just started going numb, exactly like at a dentist when you had an injection. And I didn't think that was right. So I rang 111, and they discussed what was going on, and they said, yeah, you're having a stroke. We're going to send an ambulance round. So within 10 minutes, an ambulance arrived. They came and did some tests and said, yeah, we're going to take you into hospital. Can you stand up? And I just couldn't stand up because obviously it had affected me so much straight away. So I had to be put into a special chair, went into the ambulance, lights flashing, the siren going, and it was quite surreal. It could be quite frightening, but I had a sort of inner peace that it was all going to be all right. So got to the hospital, they did some tests, had a brain scan and so on, and ended up on the stroke ward. And they gave me a thing called a clot buster, which is meant to clear all the clot and make things work again. But for about 48 hours, I was in quite a state, quite ill, and couldn't really move. And there was a radio going on, just playing some music that someone had brought in. And it was the end of the first day I got there. I was quite bewildered, not knowing what was going on. And the song that came on, the last song of the evening, was Michael Jackson's "You Are Not Alone." And I really felt that, in a way, I was sort of being spoken to there, being told everything was going to be all right. That first night was probably the worst night's sleep ever I'd had in my life, because they keep an eye on you quite closely. They would take my temperature, my blood pressure every hour, checking it was okay and so on. And then the radio was put on the next morning, and the first song that came on was Angels by Robbie Williams. So again, another sign that, someone was keeping an eye on me, watching over me, if you like. And so over the next few days, I had to sort of recover, obviously. And the hardest thing was not only could I not stand up at first, but I couldn't walk. And that was quite a shock to the system. So I had physiotherapists and various doctors and nurses all keeping an eye on me and guiding me. And eventually I was able to walk. And each time I achieved something like that, I felt sort of thankfulness within me, and was quite glad and grateful that I'd actually made that progress. So once they could get you walking, as long as you could go up and down stairs okay, that's when they discharge you. So after 10 days in hospital, I was discharged, came home, and that was only the start of it, because I had another month's worth of physio coming around to the house, checking on me, getting me to do more and more walking, and eventually went up and down the garden, then outside, down the road a little bit further, eventually around the block. And each time I made progress, as I said, I was thankful. And from all that experience, it sort of taught me to be grateful and thankful and appreciative of things that happen, that everything, I believe, happens for a purpose. And although something might be negative, in the end, there's always a positive side of things, and whatever problem you face, you can get over it. So that's where the idea of the book came from.
That's amazing there, Mark. It's so inspirational. There's a huge movement on gratitude, mindfulness. How do you see thankfulness comparing to that? Is it different? Is it the same thing?
Well, it's a mixture, to be honest with you. I know gratitude is quite a big thing, especially in America, and the idea of just being grateful or appreciative of what you have and so on. But I call it thankfulness, because I'd say it's a little bit deeper and more detailed than just sort of basic gratitude for what you have. Let me give you an example. If you go into kitchen in your home, you'll find a sink unit there with taps and so on. We often take for granted the idea that you just turn on the tap and you've instantly got cold or hot water. Now, with thankfulness, I go a little bit deeper than that. I'm not just thankful for that, but I think of the fact that we have running water that comes from somewhere, from the river eventually, and it goes through a water treatment place, and it's all treated, and we get clean water. We could be in a place where we don't have that water instantly. We have to walk miles to the nearest river or stream. We have to carry a bucket or something, a container full of water back. We spill some of it. We don't know if the water's clean or not, so we have to boil it, and that takes time. And then eventually we've got our water. But here in the Western world, we've got water instantly, just we turn a tap. Other things we can be grateful for are all the different uses of water. If you think about the fact that you have it not just for drinking, you have it for washing, cleaning, put it in have it for the dishwasher, have it for cooking, and so on. So that's something else that you can be thankful for. So the more you go into one particular item or subject, you learn to be thankful for that. So that's the idea that I have of thankfulness. It's something that you go into in great detail, if you like, and I explain this in the book about how to do that. But also the idea is if you are thankful, it makes you a more positive person. So if there is a problem that comes up, you can see that there's a positive side to it that you can be thankful for, as well as on the surface a negative side, if you like.
So that's, there's a big school of thought as well. Scientifically, they say that the more you train your brain with your synapses, then you can sort of entrain your brain, if you like, to be a certain way. So if you think positive more often, then I guess that your brain would be sort of programmed to respond in that way. So with the thankfulness, do you have to do it on a regular basis, a bit like meditation? You have to keep doing it to see the benefits?
Yes. I mean, obviously anything you do is up to you, but I practice it every day, and like anything that you practice, it eventually becomes a habit, and then eventually becomes part of your way of life, if you like. So if you train your brain to think that way, then it will do it automatically eventually. So at first it might be hard, but if you persevere, practice it every day, like you do meditation or mindfulness, then it becomes second nature, and so on.
So there's been a lot of studies in the USA about thankfulness and gratitude. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, there's a person called Rick Hansen, who's a neurologist who's done quite a lot of research, and he talks about the fact that your brain will take the shape of the thoughts that you put into it. So if you are thinking worrying thoughts, negative thoughts, if you like, your brain will take that shape. But on the other side, you can train your brain to think positive thoughts, and then the shape of the brain, or the neurons at the end will change, and he calls this neuroplasticity. So he's one guy, and then there's a guy who's in the University of Los Angeles, I think, Robert Emmons, who's probably the leading expert on gratitude and thankfulness, who's done lots of studies and so on about this, and he's written several books. So I'll just give you an example. If I just sort of read my notes on this. For example, in 2011, there was a study where several people each wrote down what they were thankful for for each day, and this went on for a few days. And there were other people who wrote down things that made them angry that day, and so on. So the group that wrote down the thankfulness, the gratitude thoughts, found that they were sleeping much better than the group that wrote down the anger, negative thoughts. And that was one study. Another study was in 2012, where it was by the University of Kentucky, where they found out that those who practiced thankfulness came out showing more empathy than those who didn't practice it, and so on. And there's obviously lots of benefits that thankfulness has.
That's very interesting. It sounds very much like meditation, but it's more of a living, conscious meditation where you're awake in the real world, practicing mindfulness, isn't it? So it's a great tool to use. So in your book, you mentioned about keeping a diary to record your thankfulness experiences. How important is this?
Yeah, it is quite important. They use this as well in studies, and they found that people who've recovering from depression or sort of say alcoholism or drug problems, if they keep a diary every day of something they can be thankful for or several things they can be thankful for on that day, that helps them to sort of recover quicker and become more positive people. Obviously, you don't have to do it, but like all things, if you put things down to memory, quite often you forget them. But if you come back to them, you can read them again, maybe a few weeks later or a few months later, if you like, and it just sort of inspires you, if you like. Obviously, if you're not that way inclined, you don't have to do it. What I do, because I don't have, often write things down like that, but I make the effort at the end of the day, just before I'm going to bed, is just to think of 3 things that I can be thankful for that have happened to me or that I've done during the day. It might be some sort of action like I managed to achieve something, or it could be that someone's contacted me that I haven't heard from a long time and I made a connection with someone like that. Or it could just be looking outside your window, looking at nature. You saw a bird fly by, or you appreciated the view of some greenery or something. So anything you like, if you think of 3 things that you've done, I find that helps calm you, and then you have a better night's sleep anyway.
So, Mark, $1 million question here is currently we're living in a lockdown situation due to the current coronavirus pandemic, both here in the UK and many countries across the world. What would you say you can still be thankful for in this situation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously there's a lot of negative things going on. People are very worried and concerned, and obviously if you've had the virus or you've known someone who's had it and someone who's died, it can be quite upsetting. But on the other hand, there's a lot of advantages, if you like, or it's making people think about a life more in more detail. They've got more time because they're not going to work, they're not going out, and so they're thinking, what's going on here? And it's helping change people's attitudes, if you like. Some people see it as perhaps a start of some sort of spiritual revolution, if you like, because people are now sort of waking up to that money isn't everything. Obviously, it might be difficult for you if you're not getting money in and so on. So hopefully the government will be helping you out there. But if whatever happens to you, there's lots of advantages that you can be thankful for. The fact that you're not rushing around as much, you're perhaps more relaxed about things, you're spending more time with your family than you might not have done in the past. You're seeing more of nature. Just going out for a walk each day, you might notice how quiet it is. There's less traffic about, obviously. You might notice birds flying about, or the trees in blossom or something like that. There's lots of things that you can be thankful for. Perhaps also that you're having a bit more time to do some reading, and you can do some research or start a hobby and so on. I actually wrote an article a couple of weeks ago, which is on the Spirit's Guide, about things to do in lockdown in a practical sense. So perhaps if you want to look at that might give you some ideas. But anything that happens, I would say it might be negative on the surface, but there's always a positive side. And that's part of what the idea of the Thankfulness book is all about, to learn to be positive in whatever situation you're in.
Thank you for that, Mark. What else can readers find in your book?
Apart from sort of learning about thankfulness, the benefits and how it can help you and so on, I've actually put in some ideas for meditations or mindfulness that you can practice at home. For example, if you're going on a journey, some of the things that you can see perhaps out the window, if you're a passenger in a car or on a train or a bus or something, how to appreciate all that's around you. Or there's ideas that you can use for a start of a meditation, such as things like gadgets or architecture or members of your family or friends or nature or whatever. There's always something around that you can be thankful for, and I do feel that people in this situation with the lockdown are starting to appreciate what they have got, and perhaps when it all dies down and people are going out again, that people will be a bit more appreciative of things around them and the freedom they have and so on. So that there's always something that you can do, and the book is there as a sort of springboard, if you like, and it can help you to become a more positive person, basically.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very interesting and very useful information. Finally, what other books have you written, and or have you got on the horizon?
Yeah, I didn't mention earlier, but I have been writing a book which has been mentioned on the Spirit Guide's website about myself, called Human Being, which is a book I've been working on for quite a few years now. That is sort of more or less ready, and what I'm doing, I'm hoping to find a publisher for that, so that hopefully will come out. But it's quite an interesting book, and hopefully quite a world-changing book in a way. With my other hat, I've actually got 2 transport-based books coming out this year. Obviously, they're being put back because of all that's been going on. But one is about road tunnels, because that's something that interests me, and I've been working on that for quite a few years. But I found a publisher for that. That's coming out hopefully in the autumn, and then another one on railways and railway stations and so on. So I'm always got ideas for books and so on. So but obviously it's a bit frustrating for me, because I did have a few talks booked and obviously they've had to be cancelled. But it's great that I'm doing this tonight, because I can speak to people that way and tell them about the book there.
Thank you, Mark. So before we go, how can people buy your book, and where can they find it?
All right, well, I've got the book here. It's in 2 versions. Obviously, you've got the printed version. You can buy that from the publisher, which is hadleybooks.co.uk. So we can still send those out to you. But obviously, better and easier, you can actually buy it as an ebook, and that you can get that from hadleybooks.co.uk, or you can buy it on Amazon in the Kindle version. But I understand with Amazon, even if you haven't got a Kindle, you can still download it onto your tablet or your smartphone, because they've got the technology to do that. So it is freely available, and as a download, it's only £3, or as a printed book, only £5. So it's not too much money, and hopefully it's something that will help you in your life.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark. It's been very interesting, and really appreciate you coming on and letting us know about your book and your story as well. I hope the story can help other people as well, if they're going through something similar, and they're obviously worried about their health. So I appreciate that today. Thank you, Mark.
Right, thank you, Ian. I've enjoyed that. Thanks very much.
Okay.